it is. Sorry. It's great to see so many people logging in and so much interest in the training session today. On my own behalf, I'm really excited. I know Mura's really excited as well. And lovely to see so many people that we've been working with over the last few months as well. I suppose I just want to welcome everybody for coming today, and thank you all for logging in today. And I hope you really enjoyed the session. By now, you're probably familiar with our avatars, which you might have seen on social media, but allow us to formally introduce ourselves and give you a little bit of context as to what we do and who we are. So as I said, my name is Barry Deehan, and my background is in child, youth and family development in residential care and community outreach support services. And I work from an applied leadership approach to health promotion and capacity building. So building consciousness around how we look after ourselves on a daily basis. Mura, would you like to introduce yourself?
I will, of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Mura O'Farrell. I am the other Youth Health Promotion Officer in the Centre with Barry, and I have a joint role in the Sexual Health Centre. I work in youth health promotion and also in research. My own background is in psychology, so I have a master's in applied psychology from UCC, and myself and Barry will be co-facilitating this webinar today. Barry's going to give you some interesting facts about us, because I'm sure you'll get to know us a little bit more throughout the webinar series, but delighted to be here, and for everybody signing up today, it's really exciting.
So a really interesting fact about myself and Mura is we both started in the Sexual Health Centre as youth health promotion officers back in September 2019. We started on the same day, and from the get-go, we formed a really strong rapport in terms of what we do on a daily basis. And I suppose we figured out very quickly that we had very similar backgrounds in terms of youth work and family development. And it was really exciting to start in a new position with somebody else. And I suppose throughout the whole COVID and lockdown situation as well, it's been really nice to have a teammate who is exploring and figuring out all the tweaks that need to be made to deliver sexual health in an appropriate way and in a fun way through creative methods. And I suppose just to give you a little bit of insight into what we do on a daily basis, as Mura said, we are the youth health promotion officers in the Sexual Health Centre. And what that means is that we deliver workshops to young people around sexual health education to raise their awareness of how to manage their own sexual health. We also do this by going into schools pre-COVID, going to informal education settings and out of school programs where young people don't have the access to sexual health education through mainstream services. So, have I left anything out there, Mura?
I think that's pretty much it. It's the overview of workshops in general.
Very good. Alongside delivering those workshops, I suppose we also design and develop the workshop programs, and we tailor those to each and every group that we work with based on the consultations that we have with their key workers and their youth workers and service providers. So again, we are available to those groups and very much tailor everything to their needs. So without further ado, I will provide you with a bit of an overview of what today's schedule will entail. We will be, excuse me, we will be online for the next hour, and the slideshow itself and the workshop itself will go on for an hour, and we will have 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. I will ask at this point, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put them in through the chat function, We are asking everybody to keep their microphones off throughout the session, just to prevent the feedback that comes through, noise-wise. And also, if you do have any feedback that you'd like to give us, as we can use this to help build our services and improve on the workshops that we're delivering, the training that we're delivering, and the services that we provide in the Sexual Health Centre as a whole. Please feel free to drop any of those into the chat function as well. As Moira said, she will be moderating for the first half of the session, so she'll be keeping an eye on those, and we'll come back to all of those towards the end as well. So to kick off today's session, we will have a look at the background and the aims and objectives of this webinar series.
We'll also give you an introduction to sexual health, all that it contains.
We will explore sexual health in the virtual world in terms of relationships, consent, and pornography.
And we'll go through all of the resources, services, and supports that are available around the topics that we bring up today.
And we'll conclude today's session, as I said, with a question and answer session at the very end. So again, I will invite your questions right now, and we'll come back to them at the very end. But without further ado, let's get started and give you a little bit of a background into how Screenage Kicks came about. So, technology is part of everyday lives, and teenagers are growing up in a virtual world. This is both positive and negative impacts on young people's health, including their sexual health. COVID-19 restrictions have led to young people spending more time online, on phones and other devices. This change has made it increasingly important to think about how we use technology to learn about sexual health experiences and relationships. The online world is fast progressing, and young people are relying on technology more and more to find the answers to their questions. So just to give you a few facts and figures, the CyberSafe annual report in 2018 revealed that 92% of 8 to 13-year-olds own their own smart device. 43% of children are talking to people online that they don't know in real life. And 52% of teachers don't feel equipped to teach online safety messages in the classroom. So this leads to the questions like, where are young people getting their information from? Are they getting the correct information? Do they know who they're getting their information from? And are these sources taking advantage with coercive intention for their own gratification? Now, again, I suppose I just want to make the connection with language here as well. I refer to them and they in this space, referring to young people. But I suppose we can't negate the fact that it's us and we. We are also contributing to the online fad, and we're also involved in social media in some way or another. I suppose we wouldn't be here today without the use of technology. It's become a huge part of our own lives, where people have been working from home, working on the internet and using the likes of Zoom. So it's definitely becoming an increased culture as well across the board. I suppose this also brings me to, like, what's the dilemma? So when we look at 92% of 8 to 13-year-olds owning their own smart device, I suppose this can be great in theory, but again, what are they accessing? Who are they talking to? Who's accessing them? I ask, what's the dilemma? I suppose a lot of you may have seen lately on Netflix the movie documentary, The Social Dilemma. And I suppose it really identifies how social media targets us and how we're, like, we are the product. We're not the consumer, we are the product. Again, just delving a little bit more into social media culture, we have TikTok, who recently had to remove a video where young people were exposed to somebody attempting suicide, and a lot of children have been exposed to that. And again, the dilemma is, how do they manage that? How do they process that? And how do they take that on board? And what effect does it have on them long term? And again, I've become, I suppose, somewhat a fan of TikTok for the comedy factor and the entertainment factor that has been on it. And I watched a video by one girl who's well known as Maura Mullins, and she can provide some very funny material now and again. But as part of her reactions, the reactions that she gets on the street from people who recognize her from TikTok, one of those examples was a 9-year-old girl who's walking along the street and says to her mom, like, "Oh, mammy, it's Maura Mullins, that girl from TikTok." And her response is, "What is TikTok?" So again, raises a concern, like, do we know what our children are at and who they're accessing online and what content they're accessing online? Again, there's articles out there about children taking to online platforms for school purposes and educational purposes, where iPads are being given out to assist them to do their schoolwork from home. And I read an article the other day on LinkedIn that was about a 6-year-old who had been given an iPad and was really excited to get this iPad. And I suppose it was discovered that the 6-year-old had been accessing porn on their iPad for a week before a parent actually realized it and before it was brought to their attention. And again, it was because an older child had shown the child how to unblock the settings that had been preset by the school, the security settings. And again, it can be really disturbing for a parent to find this out, and it can be really disturbing for us as professionals to find these things out. But again, I suppose the whole point of this webinar today is how do we respond to that, and how do we improve those situations going forward? And how do we keep our young people safe online and in the real world? So how have we responded so far? So again, we have myself and Maura here in our avatar form and doing the maths and really trying to respond in the best way possible. How this came about was during the lockdown phase, again, looking into what do teenagers need, what studies have been done, where's it going, and what are the challenges the teenagers are facing at the moment. And this very much came about from the Screenagers report in 2018 from the GCYA, which led to the development of our own online resource, which is called Screenage Kicks. And this is a campaign that we ran in the middle of June. And this is an online resource for young people, parents, youth workers, and anybody in a young person's sphere to be able to name, acknowledge, recognize the issues that are coming up for young people and to respond to young people. So we've taken this resource, we've put it out there, it's available on video, it's available on PDF, and can be accessed through our own website. It is on social media websites as well. So if you do search it, you will find it pretty easily. The next step was to progress this to bring it to you guys here today, which evolved into Screenage Kicks, the webinar series. And again, it's about how do we best respond to young people's sexual health issues in the virtual world. And throughout the series, we will be providing you with tips and tools and some of the games and the activities that we use in workshops to engage young people in developing their own awareness around sexual health. So the next progressive step would be, hello?
Don't fall off the chair.
Sorry. Could I just ask everybody to turn off their microphones, please? Because I'm just getting a little bit of feedback, and if anybody's having a private conversation, it wouldn't be fair to have it broadcast to everybody. So just to recap, Screenage Kicks, the webinar series, has been the latest step. So here we are today. And from this, we would hope to get you guys involved in keeping the conversation going and to increase young people's accessibility to our workshops and sexual health education and information. And for us as professionals to come together to creatively achieve this in times where face-to-face work has been minimized, and we need to come up with some new effective ways of engaging young people in their own education. So this will feed back into the evaluation of resources and the development of new resources, and hopefully the improvement of new resources from ourselves in the Sexual Health Centre and the Sexual Health Network across the board, and the services that you guys provide as well. So there's a great opportunity, I think, there for all of us to expand on what we're doing at the moment. Okay. So the aim of Screen Age Kicks, the webinar series, is to build capacity and confidence in responding to young people on a range of topics related to sexual health in the virtual world. And our objectives throughout the series will be to identify the core principles of sexual health and their contributions to improving sexual health outcomes for young people, identifying issues and challenges arising for young people in the virtual world, responding to a range of sexual health topics and concerns within your work settings, and to raise awareness of sexual health services, supports, and resources available to young people and everybody working with them, as well as parents. So, to introduce you to the topic of sexual health, I'm going to ask people if they wouldn't mind dropping just one word into the chat function about what sexual health means to you. One word that springs to mind when you think sexual health. And if people do feel comfortable just dropping in a word or two, that's fantastic. I can see some coming in already. And we'll come back to that a little bit later as well. Okay, so what we will look at in this section is what is sexual health. So we'll look at a definition and we'll explore what that means. We'll have a look at the core principles of sexual health and how they apply to sexual health in the virtual world. And we'll be looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the principles of sexual health. And we'll also look at the challenges to sexual health education, particularly in the context of Ireland and the work that we do from the Sexual Health Centre as well. Okay, so we'll start off with what is sexual health. So just to give you a definition, I will read it out. And we have, so sexual health is a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It is not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity. Sexual health requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences, free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. For sexual health to be attained and maintained, the sexual rights of all persons must be respected, protected, and fulfilled. And this comes from the World Health Organization, Ottawa. To give you a bit of context as to what this actually means, and I would imagine as we progress throughout the episode as well, we will see connections of what people thought sexual health was, and hopefully this might just add to your experience of what you think sexual health is. So, sexual health is neither good or bad. Good health and bad health are both ends of the spectrum, but the mention of sexual health has connotations of negativity for a lot of people, and we need to improve the language around this. It's not just STIs and unwanted pregnancy. It's relationships, it's choice, it's respect, it's diversity, it's dignity, it's daily living. And yes, sex is an activity of daily living, and it's an intricate part of everybody's health in the same way as eating, sleeping, hygiene, elimination. And we learn how to appropriately meet and manage the needs of those activities of daily living. And we need to be doing the same around sexual health. So to build good health habits around sexual health and good boundaries and good routines and know what's appropriate, when it's appropriate, and how it's appropriate. So it's about supporting young people to develop that knowledge and the skills around that to be able to practice good sexual health habits. So this definition of sexual health applies to sexual health in the virtual world in the very same way as it does the real world, given what we were saying a few moments ago, that the virtual world is highly influential. in terms of how we think, how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. And also just how we do life in general. As I said, the influential factor is massive. So our workshops provide young people with sexual health education to develop their awareness on what sexual health means and what core values they can identify within the definition that we see here, such as well-being, pleasure. Pleasure is often overlooked when it comes to sexual health, safety, respect, and diversity. So again, these core values that are coming through in the definition of sexual health will feature thematically throughout the episode and throughout the series. And we'll look again at core principles of sexual health, where you recognize some of these also. So looking at the core principles of sexual health, what are they? There are 6 core principles of sexual health, and they are consent, non-exploitation, protection against HIV, STIs, and unwanted pregnancy, honesty, shared values, pleasure, shared or singular. And within these 6 core principles lie a ream of strengths and weaknesses to sexual health and sexual health education, whether in real life or in the virtual world. When we are informed and knowledgeable of the strengths, we are more likely to enter with safety and intimacy in mind. On the other hand, vulnerability and abuse can also feature in the absence of value and education around these principles. And again, it's about generating these conversations with young people, increasing their understanding and awareness of what these terms are and what they mean in terms of healthy relationships. So in terms of strengths, as far as consent is concerned, we have strengths in having choice, being able to say no, being able to agree, being able to consent to what we are engaging in, and being able to consent to healthy relationships and being able to have conversations within our relationships to make them healthier. Non-exploitation, a strength in that, assertiveness and well-being. So again, working in communications to sexual health education is really important, and being able to develop assertiveness skills to be able to say no, to be able to stand up and fight for your own rights and fight for the rights of somebody else and somebody else's protection or your own protection, leading to your overall well-being. Strength and protection against HIV, STIs, and unwanted pregnancy. So the strengths that lie within that are having the autonomy to look after your sexual health, to know what educational resources are out there, to know what services you can access to support sexual health well-being, and to build our awareness around what is available to us and how we can access that and how it affects us and impacts us in our bodies, and again contributes massively to the choice factor. So honesty, having transparency, being able to be honest with your partners, being able to trust your partners in what they're saying and what you're being told and the information that you're being given, but also transparency to be able to, again, stand up, give consent and be assertive. And we have shared values, which contributes to the consolidation and confluence and synergy within a relationship. So bringing people together, being stronger within a relationship through having those communication skills, through being able to have the integrity to hold on to your views and your values and share those views and values without, I suppose, without feeling like that your values do not matter. So again, it's about equality, leading to quality. And we have pleasure, as I said, often an overlooked factor of sexual health. And we have here shared or singular. So it refers to your own sexual pleasure and how you enjoy sexual activity and how you enjoy sexual experiences, and also how you have empathy and compassion towards somebody else's. So again, moving into the intimacy factor and meeting somebody else's needs, and again, building your relationship based on the needs of the mutual parties. So what are the weaknesses that are involved here? So we have in relation to consent, we have coercion and manipulation. So again, like where young people aren't informed, and adults too, don't have a knowledge around consent, it can lead to coercion and manipulation, where those skills of assertiveness aren't built, and people don't feel like they have a choice, and are little unsure of what a healthy relationship is. I suppose, again, we all have a natural instinct to be loved. We all have a natural want to be loved. And consent is a huge part of that as well in terms of keeping ourselves safe. The non-exploitation factor, the behavior of others, the threat from others, and especially in the online world where we can be targeted or we can be threatened with image abuse, which Mura will speak to a little bit later on, and we'll get a little bit more information on that. But again, these are just the weaknesses that crop up immediately. So again, the weaknesses around protection against HIV, STIs, and unwanted pregnancy, again, is accessibility to education, or the lack of accessibility to sex education. And this can prevent us from making positive choices and maintaining our sexual health in a positive way. The honesty factor, again, exposure and exploitation, especially in the online world. We can be too honest online. We can show too much of ourselves. Young people especially can give too much information with posting up photos as to their location. People have access to their age. People know exactly where they are because they don't know how to set their privacy settings. So we can think about exposure and exploitation in terms of sexual health in that way. Again, shared values, we can look at discrimination and seduction. I suppose, again, within sexual health promotion and education, we very much promote diversity, the inclusive factor, the acceptance factors, and we'll come to those again in a little while. Again, I'm showing you these because they are thematic throughout the series. So again, with the pleasure factor, we have gratification and violence. So people taking advantage of the pleasure factor, but only thinking about their own sexual gratification, and not seeing the value and worth in others, and maybe not even themselves. And we also have the guilt and shame factors that can come with sexual health and being able to talk about it or not being able to talk about it, especially in the event of where something can go wrong. So we will be referring to these principles throughout the next 4 sessions as we look at sexual health issues for young people in the virtual world. So it is nice to be familiar with them. Okay, so let's have a look at what the challenges are to sexual health education. So again, myself and we're out there, we're doing workshops every day, and I suppose we do often come across challenges to sexual health education, whether it's talking to young people and looking at the challenges that they have, but also, like, as adults, there are challenges that come up for ourselves as well. So first of all, sex, sexuality, and sexual health are all complex, sensitive, and oftentimes contentious subjects. This doesn't take away from the fact that they are part of growing up, and they are intricate factors of overall health throughout the life cycle. Again, let's be conscious of the language you use here. Oftentimes, these terms fall into the net of issues. And again, I suppose it's about normalizing the conversation around them. It's about becoming comfortable with the topics themselves and having a deep-rooted understanding of what sex, sexuality, and sexual health actually mean. And again, we will be going through all of these throughout the series. Okay. Another common challenge to sexual health education is adults' discomfort or conflicted values about child and adolescent sexual questions. So let's consider for a moment the momentum of sexual health over the past 3 decades. We've had the legalization of contraception and homosexuality in the 90s to marriage equality and choice to terminate pregnancy in more recent times. Add advancements of technology to this, and we really have to look at what young people have to navigate in the modern world when it comes to the online world, and are we keeping pace when it comes to keeping them informed to improve their sexual health outcomes. based on what we have explored so far here today. And I suppose when I look at adult discomfort or conflicted values about child and adolescent questions, another recent topic that comes up for me in that context is the recent Tampax tampon ad that has been removed from our screens on TV because it was deemed inappropriate. And I suppose, again, as a sexual health educator and as somebody who has worked in social care settings quite a lot, I really see the importance of period education, especially as a male who has worked with young teenagers who don't maybe have a female that they feel comfortable talking to about these things. And it can be quite a contentious issue as well. But to know the facts and to know how the female body works for me as a male is really important. And it gives me a little bit of understanding around what feelings are coming up for people who need a little bit of support around these things. Maybe, yeah, the ad wasn't, I suppose it could have been put out there better, it could have been in a better context, and it could have had a lot more, I suppose, relevance. But at the same time, yeah, it's about asking, how can we do it better? Yes, we can raise awareness, but we need to be able to do it appropriately and in a tasteful way as well. So, again, one of the most universal areas of sexual value conflict is the sexual debut, usually called losing one's virginity. There is no universal cultural agreement about circumstances upon which a person should first experience sexual intercourse. Now, I suppose there's no universal agreement about how somebody should experience sexual intercourse for the first time, but every country, every state across the globe values consent and understands that consent is a really important factor when it comes to sexual intercourse. And yeah, as we said earlier on, like, it needs to be free of coercion, free of discrimination, and free of abuse. So one thing we do know is that the younger the sexual debut occurs, the higher the risk of negative sexual health outcomes are for people. So what do I mean by negative sexual health outcomes? So engaging in unhealthy relationships, patterns, unwanted pregnancy, increased STI transmission, and less likely to seek out health support systems to change their sexual health outcomes. Again, bringing it back to the guilt and shame factor around not understanding that sexual health is actually part of everyday life. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat function here and see what people think that sexual health does refer to. So again, we're getting a lot of answers that are pretty much on the ball. So we have awareness, we have safety, we have risk minimization, harm reduction, condoms, confidence, equality, respect. Okay. So again, yeah, as I say, pretty much on the ball, which is great to see, because again, we're all here because we want to advocate for the sexual health of young people. With that in mind, I just want to bring your attention to, if you need any more information, we are available through email on education@sexualhealthcenter.com, and we will be putting these up again at the end of the slideshow. But again, that address is there if anybody does have any questions or queries that they want to explore further. Okay. So I just need to close out the chat function here again. Yeah. Sorry, my slide isn't moving on. So how can we best respond? So first of all, don't panic. The current attitudes towards sex education is a bit problematic in that without a standard curriculum, the levels of knowledge among adolescents vary greatly. Studies have indicated that sexual health is most effective when it includes motivational and skill building components, extending beyond providing basic information. So again, throughout the series, we will be giving you hints and tips on how to engage with young people and how to respond to young people. But again, it's about providing those skills for young people as well throughout our workshops. So have a self-check, checking in with ourselves to understand our own values and views and whether we react or respond to queries or issues that young people bring. Working towards creating a safe space where conversations can happen to provide factual, up-to-date information and be respectfully curious. We'll elaborate a little bit more on these as we work through the relationship section of the session. Okay. So just to bring to mind, we encourage participants to develop confidence and awareness on how to manage their own sexual health by utilizing a range of skills. And skills such as resourcefulness, increased awareness of resources and community-based support networks, but also an increased awareness around the resources that people hold within themselves. So your voice, your choice, again, your assertiveness. We value communication very much, and we will explore the words, body language, tone aspects of communication in a minute. Problem solving skills, so solution finding, goals, actions, and what to do if you are faced with an issue. So critical thinking, again, understanding their ecology, understanding the world around us, knowing how that works and how it influences us and how we impact on it. Personal health awareness, looking at strengths and limitations. So again, bearing safety and self-preservation in mind. Emotional regulation. So building emotional regulation skills through self-awareness, empathy and understanding and appropriate expression. And finally, but by no means least, positive decision making. So being able to take responsibility for our own sexual health and being accountable for the actions that we do take and how they can impact on us and other people as well. So this leads us nicely into the relationship section of today's session. So what are relationships? Healthy relationships are the building blocks of healthy sexual encounters with other people. In the virtual world, understanding communication is more important than ever. It's absolutely vital. So while the online world provides many positives, such as the ability to stay connected with family and friends, share talents, and even discover new ones, it also means a growing relationship with our handset or our devices and the possibility of dependency. So this can debilitate the ability to function without said device, and also the ability to connect with people and form meaningful relationships within the real world. So again, it's about developing boundaries for ourselves so that we can make time for meaningful relationships within the real world without being dependent on our smart device and not having it to hand all the time. We are also encountering a generation that have never lived in a world without smartphones. The virtual world is a consistent feature of life, and here we are living Zoom life at the moment. And I suppose one thing that always comes to mind is the Wi-Fi symbol added to the baseline of Maslow's hierarchy of need. And especially, I suppose, we can have seen that more and more throughout the lockdown phases of COVID-19, where people don't have access to the internet all the time. And that's something else that we need to bear in mind as well. Not everybody does have access to the internet or to devices. So again, it's, I suppose, considered a basic need, but not everybody has it. And not everybody has access to it, even though I suppose we all know it's not actually a basic need. It's about learning to live without it. Again, I've had many conversations within my work with young people, many who've added people on social media who they've never met in person. And this is what relationships can look like for a young person in the virtual world. Again, relationships in the virtual world extend far beyond that of real life. I guess there's numerous reasons for online engagement, and again, anonymity can be a huge factor in that. And I suppose, again, it's looking at, okay, yes, we can stay connected with friends and we can stay connected with family and colleagues, but I suppose we're also exposed to unwanted exchange where we can receive communications from people that we don't know, communications that we don't want, communications of a bullying nature, fear and threat as well. And again, it's about teaching young people to manage those situations appropriately. Again, having said, working with many young people who've added people online that they've never met in person, and the reasons that they do add these people is because they think they're hot, they're flirty, they're generous. We can respond to this in a respectfully curious manner too, without being overly shocked or frightening to a young person, and just be interested to assist them in evaluating if this person is real or if this person is a catfish. Not to create paranoia, but to develop skills of risk assessment. And again, as I say, isolation has gained a pronounced presence in light of the lockdown phase of COVID-19. But for many, it's a factor of everyday life. Long before the arrival of COVID-19, it's a space that young people can often seek solace in the search of belonging, connection, validation, and understanding, either by finding relatable others or by reinventing themselves completely to fit in, or even to manipulate others, which is developing coercive behavior in itself. And again, that brings us to the weaknesses of the core values of sexual health. Unfortunately, we can't always control who contacts us or the content of their communications, which is an infringement on our consent when we haven't asked for it and we haven't been asked for permission to receive these images, or sex as we'll call them, which Mira will talk about a little bit later. The virtual world of social media is often one of criticism, bullying and hate as well, impacting on one's self-esteem, independence and self-worth. We can best respond to this by encouraging young people to explore and understand their own values, such as what they consider to be healthy, respectful relationships, and how to disengage from negative behavior of others online with value on their own time, energy, safety, and well-being. And with a natural curiosity and a need to explore sex and sexuality, we cannot deny that teenagers are familiar with the online dating and hookup culture as well. Teaching them of the risks that these pose for themselves are paramount, and this brings us to the responsibility factor and the curiosity factor. It is also about placing importance to point out that their actions also have implications and consequences for others. So it is just as important to talk about the implications of coercion, of their own coercion and deception when participating in these dating apps when they're underage themselves, and what that can mean for somebody else who's a little bit older. So this brings us on to the communication factor. Within our workshops, we discuss the importance of non-threatening, non-violent, and reactive communications. So we discuss these in the context of personal relationships. We also identify explicitly that these skills are highly beneficial to the young person's capacity to manage conflict in a variety of situations and develop a mindfulness around communication skills to effectively convey what they mean, with consideration for how tone, body language impact on the recipient and their expectation of a response or a reaction. So within our workshops and within our campaigns, we have used this dialectical behavioral therapeutic tool. So it's the GIVE anagram, which just prompts people to be a little more mindful about how they communicate and what factors we need to consider when we are communicating with other people. So the anagram GIVE, we'll start off with the G, we have the gentle, so being courteous, avoid judgmental behavior. be interested, take in what the other person says, avoid interrupting, validate, acknowledge the other person's feelings and opinions, and have an easy manner. Aim for a light-hearted tone. And again, I want to show you this pie chart here, which is also available in our Screen Age Kicks, within our Screen Age Kicks campaign. So communication is the way we connect to other people. Words only account for 7% of communication, making it difficult to show our true feelings and intentions online. As you can see the pie chart here, we have 7% words, 55% body language, which is a huge miss when it comes to communicating over technology. So when we look at communication in the virtual world, we consider that words only account for 7% of what we exchange with others. We have to consider that we are missing 93% of the context in a text message, meaning that 93% of that communication is made up of how we perceive words. We have to question, how was it intended to be received by the sender? So again, that all depends on our relationship with the sender. If it's somebody we don't know, we can totally misinterpret what's being said to us. If we do know a person, again, we know that they may be coming with a light-hearted tone. And I suppose as a cultural thing in Ireland, I suppose we have a huge culture of maybe insulting each other, but in a very sarcastic way, and sometimes it can be interpreted as a term of endearment, but at the end of the day, that's still not okay. It's how we feel about what we receive, really, at the end of the day. So, on the other hand, pictures speak 1,000 words, and text is definitely enhanced with the addition of emojis, memes, and even bitmojis, which we've become a huge fan of lately. But we certainly need to deepen our communication skills beyond what we see on screen. So, how can we best respond to these issues? Ask yourself, how do you feel as a practitioner when a young person comes to you with an issue? And knowing and being able to acknowledge how you feel, but being able to park that aside until you need to take action. But in the meantime, thinking about what does the young person feel and what do they need from you right now? What do they need from you in the moment? And how can you best respond in that moment? So what you can do is ask respectfully curious questions. Like, do you have friends in common? Have your mates met them? Have you spoken over the phone? Have there been two-way video calls? Can you verify that this person is who they say they are? And by exploring a young person's understanding of what their query is and what they think the correct response might be, it opens a dialogue to understand, validate, direct, and encourage autonomy to develop sexual value systems of their own. How do we do this? We communicate with young people in a transactional manner by nature. So meeting them where they're at in a pedagogical manner of mentoring. So it is about fine-tuning our listening skills and reframing our attitudes towards conversations throughout understanding the value of sexual health education as a life skill to be developed. And just to remember, we are here to support you and your young people to develop sexual health awareness and to develop this valuable lifelong skill throughout our workshops, our helpline services and support services within the centre and across the wider sexual health network as well. So what can you do is ask respectfully curious questions such as, do you have friends in common? Have your mates met them? Have you spoken over the phone? Have there been two-way video calls? And tips for yourselves. Just a few things to remember when responding to young people is explore the young person's understanding of what their query is. I'm not a fan of the term active listening. I prefer to approach it as actual listening. So active listening refers to self-awareness of body language and reactive response. And oftentimes that can overtake what we're actually hearing because we're so focused on what does my face say, what does my body language say, But if we focus on actually listening to what a young person is saying, we should be able to summarize back to a young person what we're hearing. So, Sammy, this is what I'm hearing, and this is what I'm seeing. And you're able to connect feelings to behavior as well. So, like, I can see you're agitated, I can see, and you're validating all those points for a young person. And being able to identify the needs, wants, and wishes to explore potential outcomes before they occur. How do we do this? Like meeting them where they're at. So to be without judgment and bias can be really difficult if we don't share the desires or values of others. But it is important to respect the diversity and emotional intelligence that is practiced within consenting experiences. And it's really important not to underestimate our young people as well. I suppose, again, they are accessing information on the internet, and it is up to us to identify whether this is correct information, whether this is just playground talk, or where do we go to find out a little bit more. There may be cases where morality and sorry, I lost my train of thought. There may be cases where morality and legality come into question. It is just as important to respond to these scenarios in a non-judgmental way and in a manner that's in the best interest of the young person, no matter how conflicted we do feel with our own values. It's really important that a young person feels like that they've been heard. They've probably been building up to asking these questions for a long time, as many adults do too. So give them credit for coming forward with these questions. And if you do come up against issues that you find concerning, where they're in a position of harming themselves or somebody else, that we do refer to our own duty of care, the governance of our own workplaces, policies and procedures and legislation, and minding yourself in that as well. Okay, so finally, no bias, no judgment, no exception. And that's our motto within the Sexual Health Centre. Whatever the need, whatever the query, whatever the issue we think is being brought to us, there is no bias, no judgment, exception. Sexual health is part of everyday life, and all sorts of things come up for absolutely everybody, and there's no shame in that. Okay, so that concludes the first part of our webinar today. So I'm going to pass you over to Moira. I just realized the time. I'm really sorry, I've run a lot over. So I'm going to pass you over to Moira to work on our consent and pornography piece.
Fabulous.
Apologies for that, Moira.
No bother. I'm just going to share my slides if that's all right with you. Can we do a swap? Can you take yours down?
I can.
Thanks a million. Pop these up here now quickly. Yeah. Sorry everyone about that. Can everybody see the slides? Can you see them, Barry?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I am going to just approach this in a slightly different way. So what I'm going to do is use questions that you might be asked from some of the young people that you work with around the issues of consent and pornography. And we're going to talk through how you might answer them in the moment, what information you need to have, and then what kind of resources and supports you might need going forward in how you answer them and the people you can link in with. So I suppose a lot of the time when we're doing workshops with young people, we want them to kind of be comfortable, and we ask them kind of what issues are coming up for them and what's going on. So I've taken kind of inspiration from some of the questions that we've received that might be applicable to the work that you do as well. So one thing that often comes up is something like, I want to have sex with my girlfriend, but she's only 16. That's okay, right? So we're going to look at some of the issues that are raised by this question. So obviously one of the main things that comes up is the area of consent. The other thing that they're obviously asking is they're thinking about having sex or potentially have already had a sexual encounter with their partner, and also the legal age of consent in Ireland and the information around this. So while it seems like, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, there's a couple of things that we need to break down and address when we're answering a question like this for a young person. So these are videos that we would use in the workshops that we're doing. I won't actually play it today just for time, but it will be available in the resources and the links that we give you. So often when we're working with young people, it's great to provide them with a definition. So when we ask, like, what is consent? Consent is a mutual, voluntary, informed decision between clear-minded, of-age participants before any and every sexual act. Now, as professionals, to us, that probably means something, or we can think about it and we can apply it. But often when we're working with young people or they're wondering what consent is, it can be kind of a gray area or something they're not too sure about. So we find using visual aids and games and kind of different ways to get the message across is great. And Tea and Consent, which is a video that's available on YouTube, is a great resource to play for them that really just makes it very black and white, that you wouldn't force a cup of tea on somebody, you wouldn't make it for them in a way that they didn't like, you wouldn't turn up with a cup of tea just because they had one with you on Saturday. And consent is very much the same. So it's a great kind of way to go through that with somebody. It's going to try to play for me now. No, we got past it. So I suppose the other things then, and the advice that you need to know on how you can answer that question for a young person, is really knowing the facts in and around consent, so that you feel prepared, you feel that you're able to answer that question in the moment, and that you have some things in your arsenal that you can bring up. So one of the main issues, I suppose, in Ireland that always comes up for us is the age of consent. So the legal age of consent is in Ireland for males and for females is 17. Often people get confused with that because I suppose we have a lot of UK influences and television shows. So people think, you know, oh, maybe it's 16. It's not. It's 17 for males and for females. And it's something that's really important that they understand that both parties have to be 17. Now, there is some grey area in and around that. So what I'm going to talk to you about is something called the Romeo and Juliet defence. I don't know if anybody's heard about this, but in Ireland, if we often get asked, like, are two young people breaking the law if they engage in a sexual act if they're not 17, or maybe one is 16 and one is 18, and how does that work? So I suppose the answer is not necessarily. So while our age of consent is 17, the law recognises that younger people may be engaging in sexual activity with one another, and has introduced something called this proximity of age defence. So we always refer to it, or people know it as this Romeo and Juliet defence. So that means that if a person has been charged with an offence of engaging in a sexual act with somebody who is 15 or 16 years of age, they can put forward this defence if certain conditions apply. So he or she is younger or not more than 2 years older than the child. So the person being, considered here for prosecution would not be 2 years older than the other party. Consent was freely given and voluntary. Neither party felt exploited or intimidated, and neither person is a person in a position of authority. So really that came into play around the idea that if you had two young people who were in what they considered to be a loving relationship, they had agreed with one another, they were going to have sex, that they most likely wouldn't be prosecuted for that. So that kind of comes up in our question here when he's saying, I want to have sex with my girlfriend, but she's only 16, that's okay, right? The other thing that we'd kind of be looking at there is, okay, so these are the facts. Potentially you could have sex as long as the age is within a certain range. Are they making this decision clear-minded? So a lot of thing that comes up and is often linked with sexual health is drugs and alcohol and kind of mental health issues. So it's important that we raise for young people when we're doing these workshops the impact of kind of drugs and alcohol on their decision making, lowering their inhibition. And if somebody is highly intoxicated, they are not able to give consent. So somebody who has had a drink and is going to remember and is making a decision can potentially give consent, but somebody who is passed out on the floor or isn't able to verbalize their consent or potentially remember the sexual act is not in a position to give consent. So this idea of Dutch courage a lot comes up for kind of young people of, we'll just have a few drinks, it'll make it easier, it's better. It actually muddies the water, and a lot of times people will make and take much more risky decisions under the influence of substances. So that's a huge kind of area to bring up with young people of the effect that other substances can have on their decision-making capacity. It's really important that they check in with their partners is another thing that we would always advise. So making sure that the other person is okay before, during and after a sexual act, that they know they've gotten consent, that if somebody, maybe isn't feeling great about it afterwards, that that's still a responsibility and it's a joint decision that they've been involved with, and that they check in with a new partner. So again, anytime something changes. So we always describe it in a simple way of, just because you agreed to hold somebody's hand, you're not giving them permission to kiss you. And that's the same if somebody agrees to engage in oral sex. It's not a given that they're going to engage in any other type of sex with you. So you have to check in, you have to get permission, and you have to get consent. So it's really breaking it down and making it clear and accessible to young people when talking about consent. It's really good to use kind of concrete examples as well. So a lot of the time consent links with somebody's body language, how they're feeling. So you can read a lot of that off somebody and using examples for them. So I always think of things of, if we're talking about contraception with young people, we'll, you know, do a condom demo, we'll teach them how to use it properly. And in terms of getting consent, we'd say to them, imagine now that you have to go into the staff room or into one of the, you know, the professional rooms in the building and impart this knowledge on them. So you have to walk in and tell them exactly how to use a condom correctly. Automatically somebody kind of tenses up, their body changes, they might blush, their voice might get weaker, they're kind of, you know, oh, I'm not interested in doing that now, I don't want to do it. And that's the same type of body language that you might be able to read on somebody if they're not really sure that they want to engage in a sexual act. So we can make it really simplified, really clear, give them concrete examples and ideas, and hopefully by doing that and making it fun and, you know, doing some kind of walking debates with them like we would do in the workshop, it becomes part of their narrative and their understanding of, okay, actually I remember her talking about this, or oh god, yeah, you know, that idea of my face blushing and I'm looking at the floor and I don't want to do it, that person looks like they're doing a little bit of that, maybe they're not sure. So it's just getting them to check in and question and really understand things, and know that the person has the right to change their time and withdraw consent at any time. That's a huge thing that we stress in the workshops as well. So a lot of the time, you know, people think, oh well, you know, I've gotten consent, so that's it, it's fine, we can do this now next Saturday and every week going forward. So we give things like, you know, if you were lucky enough to have a car and you lent your car keys to your friend on Saturday to go to the shops, that doesn't mean that they can just turn up on Tuesday and borrow your car. They don't have that right to your car keys. And it's the same with consent. You might do it on Saturday, but you mightn't actually want to engage in a sexual act with somebody any other time. So they can withdraw it at any time, they can change their mind during, after, and you have to stop. So they're the important things to know, I suppose, in terms of trying to answer a question like that around consent with the young people that you work with. And also then our Safer Sex campaign that's on the left-hand side of the screen here is available on the Sexual Health Centre website. This is a great resource in just how to be safe, especially during the pandemic. So if you are aware that although you've departed all of your wisdom and your information around consent and somebody is still going to go ahead, you also want to be able to provide them with services and resources to protect themselves. So at the Sexual Health Centre, we give out free condoms and lube. That's something that young people can access. We also do free pregnancy testing, and we have free pregnancy counselling on site, so that if somebody does find themselves in a position, or you know, they're not sure, they might be pregnant or their girlfriend might be pregnant, that it's a resource that they can come and access and be supported in a very caring, nurturing environment, and that we're person-centered. So just to know those resources and supports are out there. You can also ring us or email us, and we will do everything we can to support and signpost if it's another service that potentially somebody needs. Flying through now, sorry, I'm just conscious of time. So the next question then would be one that's coming up and become a huge issue for young people, is around the kind of sexting and sending of nude images and revenge porn. So here we have a girl saying, she keeps asking me to send nudes. I guess I better send some, after all, it's not really a big deal, right? And this seems to be an attitude that we're coming up against a lot, which is young people thinking that, you know, this is the norm. We have Instagram, we have Snapchat, we communicate visually, virtually, we send pictures of everything. I suppose I'm expected to do that as well. What difference does it make? And so it's really important when you're asked questions like this that you can break them down for yourself and think, well, what are coming up for the young people in this? You know, sexting obviously it's a term, it's a word we all understand now that maybe didn't exist before. It's something people were encouraged to do, in fact, during the pandemic and COVID, because it was a safer option than meeting somebody face to face. But there's also the undertone then in that, which is intimate image abuse, as we're going to call it, or revenge porn as it's commonly known. And then the legal issues around sending nude pictures underage are huge, depending on the age of the young people that you're working with. So sexting, I suppose, involves sending nude and receiving sexually explicit images. Sexting is usually intended to be a private form of communication between two people, but sometimes these private texts or images end up being public or shared with classmates. And that can be very, very distressing for young people and can be a very difficult thing for them to deal with. So when we're working around this topic, obviously, again, we have videos and different things that we will use, but it's really important, I suppose, as a professional working in this area, that you have some of the legal information around it and what it really means. So while our age of consent, I suppose, in Ireland is 17, so somebody can agree to have, or can actually legally give consent to have a sexual act with somebody at 17, it is illegal for anyone to send an image of themselves under the age of 18. So anybody aged under 18 is considered to be a child for the purpose of pornography or sending images. And therefore, if a young person is sending images to a partner, they are essentially distributing child pornography. The person in receipt of that image, even if it was consensual, is receiving child pornography. So they are now in possession of that. And a lot of the time when these things go bad and people start to share it, they're sharing it among schools and friends, all of those people equally are complicit in this sharing of child pornography. And a lot of the times I think this issue gets lost, or people don't understand how serious it is, and well, so-and-so sent it to me, so I'll just send it on. So it's really getting them to stop and think and understand, just because you received it, is it right to send it on? What is the actual legal implications around this? Because oftentimes people are afraid to talk about this in case it encourages things, but it's really important that we do, so that we can encourage them to actually not share or send these photos, and that there is potentially a legal consequence to it. So intimate image abuse or revenge porn has become a huge issue, and it's something that comes up a lot in our workshops or in some of the helpline or support calls that we get. And it's when somebody shares or threatens to share the intimate images or videos of somebody that they have sent to them without their consent, with the intention of causing distress. So just to give you a couple of the facts and figures there, which are actually really interesting, young people aged 15 to 29 are most likely to report being threatened by revenge porn sharing. Young people aged 18 to 29 are mainly the ones that have actually had photos publicly posted of them, and men and women are equally likely. And the LGBTI plus people are at much higher risk than heterosexual people, with 17% of them having threatened or actually had photos posted of them. So there are some really interesting statistics just to look at how common and how many people are actually affected by this. And just to say as well, the reason that I refer to it as intimate image abuse rather than revenge porn is the term revenge porn, for people who have been the victim of this type of crime, I suppose, is that it creates a connotation that somehow they've done something wrong, or that to get revenge on somebody, it would suggest that they have done something to deserve this type of act. So intimate image abuse kind of better reflects the idea that somebody had something that they shared which was very intimate, and it is now being used against them in some kind of way. So while we know it as revenge porn, intimate image abuse is a much kind of more acceptable term for victims of this, that they feel more comfortable with. So if you have come up against any young people, or you do, again, we're a great resource and we can offer support and give you any of the information that we can around this. I suppose it's important to know that revenge porn isn't currently an offence under Irish law. The Harassment, Harmful Communications and Related Offences Bill 2017 is in the third stage, known as the committee stage. So it is in process and we're hoping that it will be there soon, but it's currently not an offence. So if somebody shares an image without somebody else's consent, the young person, I suppose, can ask the person to delete it if they know them, if they know where it is, and they can contact the social media platforms where these images have potentially been posted and report it and ask for it to be taken down. But as we're all unfortunately aware, a lot of the time when these images go out, they are saved and shared and spread out much further than where their original source was. So really support and kind of offering support to the young person becomes paramount to kind of supporting them to get through it. So linking them in with friends and family and making them realize that they are a victim in something, that this is not their fault in any way, that we can educate around it. We can encourage people to be much more aware of why they're sharing images, who they share it with, what would happen if they received the image you're sending with other people around them or friends. Is that person likely to show friends? Would they send it on? And if for any reason these relationships go bad, which young people don't often think about, is that person likely to use this in any way against them? And it's important to consider these when we consider sharing images, along with the idea that actually under the age of 18, this isn't something that is legal. And just finally, to touch on pornography as well before we finish, Pornography, I suppose, is a huge issue. And this week alone in the centre, we had 3 queries from parents for males aged 13 to 14 about problematic pornography behaviour. So this is something that comes up a lot for young people and is something that's really important to touch on. So a question again in the potential kind of things. I watch porn every day, sure, that's the best way to learn about sex. And this is an attitude we come up against a lot. So young people in this virtual world have phones in their pockets, they have access to pornography at the tip of their fingers, they can do it secretly in their bedroom, they can do it on kind of all kinds of devices, as Barry was saying earlier. Like, the next generation is probably much more tech savvy than we will ever be, so they'll be able to take down any barriers or different things that exist. So how do we go about it when they're using it both for pleasure, for masturbation, to learn about sex, to be curious, and how do we protect them in that? So when somebody asks us a question like this, again, it's pornography. And the other thing that comes up a lot is real world sex versus porn sex. So how do we educate and teach them that what you're seeing in porn isn't a representation of real life sex, that it doesn't represent the intimate relationships, it doesn't generally show conversations about consent, getting consent, or any of the negative consequences that can be as a result of these acts. So when we think about these things, we think about the difference between what we call planet Earth and planet porn. And this is actually just a visual. I've taken some of the cards. So this is a game that myself and Barry use in some of the workshops that we do. And what it is called is Planet Earth, Planet Porn. There is a charge for it, but it's a really fantastic resource to have. And what it is these cards with different, some of them are just scripts, some of them are images, and we give them out to the young people and they have to separate out and decide where this belongs. So we have things like Planet Earth. Now, I've obviously organized them in the correct order just so we can make it clearer today, where people talk about their feelings, where people go for regular checkups in case they have an STI if they're sexually active, where the pizza delivery guy just delivers pizza, we're not expecting anything else when he arrives, where people don't always wear makeup and dress up for sex. And then on the other side, we have things like where sex is very loud, where people only ever talk about sex, where people rip off their clothes, where everybody orgasms, and where in a way, sex is perfect. People don't have to get consent. People don't have to worry about STIs. People rarely use condoms and people just go straight for it. A lot of the time, pornography is kind of male-centered. So the man is in control of a lot of things and making the decisions. And it depicts a very certain type of view of how sex should be. So if we consider that this is where young people are going to learn about sex, this is what they think is normal, if this is what they're seeing and we're not challenging it and we're not open to dialogue around it, this is what they're going to be going out there and doing. And what we always say to them in the workshop to really kind of hammer home when we do these exercises is, imagine you went to the cinema and watched Fast and the Furious, for example, and Vin Diesel is driving around like a lunatic at 100 miles an hour in and out of cars on the motorway and jumping over bridges in his car, and he gets out perfectly fine. We don't get into our car at the end of the movie and drive home thinking that we're Vin Diesel in Fast and Furious, because we understand that this is a movie, this is a script, this person is a paid actor, this is a stunt. And it's trying to get that message across that porn is exactly that. It is a movie. These are paid actors and actresses. They're paid to look like this. They are paid to act that way. And it is not a real representation. So it's really kind of having a bit of fun with it, being open to talking about it and making it relatable and understandable to them. And what this, I suppose, whole concept is called then in the bigger picture of being a professional is porn literacy. So the issue is that pornography is a growing health concern and it is becoming a problem for young people, and how do we respond? And porn literacy really is the answer that people have come up with. So it's a framework from which young people can critically examine and make sense of the sexual images they see. So if we think about how accessible porn is to them, how much they can be on it, how little we can actually potentially be aware of what they're seeing or what they're exposed to, our best defense against this is to be open to talking about it, critically examining it with them as we would anything else, and really making or giving them the power to make the decision of if they're going to consume it, how they do, or if they do, and that it's in a responsible way and they understand really what it's about. So the facts, I suppose, again, just to highlight for people, pornography is unrealistic. It depicts unrealistic scenarios. It depicts specific body types, and often that can give people complexes at a young age about what they should look like because they're comparing their bodies to these actors who are paid to stay fit and look a certain way, to have their hair groomed a certain way. And it's really important that they understand what really is porn and what's real world. The interactions in pornography exclude context, communication, consequences, and the discussions on consent, condom use, sexual health, testing, getting STI screenings, that there could be any risk involved in all of this, and the awkward moments that are reality of sexual encounters are all missing in pornography. And therefore, when youth often engage in it, then if this is their only reference, they can find a huge letdown, they can struggle with it, and they also mightn't be able to manage these things when they come up because they have no reference for it if this is their only reference point. So it's really important that we're open to talking about this, that we engage with it, and that we understand this is only going to continue to be an issue for young people, and it's something we need to be open to. So that is kind of an overview of our issues in regarding this. So we just have some take-home messages as a recap for everybody of what actually we've spoken about today. So you just remember everything, I suppose, from us. So I will let Barry go through the first one.
So first take-home message from today is healthy relationships are building blocks of sexual health encounters with other people. In the virtual world, clear communication skills are more important than ever.
And age of consent is really important. So 17 for males and females, and consent must be given before any and every sexual act and can be revoked at any time.
Sending and receiving nude or explicit photos by or of anyone aged under 18 years is illegal and considered to be child pornography under criminal law, Sexual Offences Act 2017.
Intimate image abuse is the sharing of or threatening to share intimate images of another person. While this is not illegal in Ireland, a person can request that the site hosting the information remove it as it was shared without their consent.
And finally, pornography can be enjoyable to watch for various reasons. For example, sexual arousal, to aid masturbation, curiosity to learn about sex, but it is really important young people realize it is not a reliable source of information regarding sexual relationships and safety.
Fantastic. So these are just some of the resources that I mentioned earlier. So if you go onto the Sexual Health Centre website, you can look up the Screen Age Kicks resource, and all of these are available then as part of it that we've covered today. Our session 2 is on next month, so 13th of October, contraception STIs. It's available on Eventbrite, the same as before. So please do sign up, and we look forward to seeing you all there. And finally, if there is any questions, I actually haven't checked, Barry, in the box from anybody. If you do have any questions that we haven't been able to get to today, or anyone had to leave the webinar series, or you know anybody who has a question, they can email it into us at education@sexualhealthcentre.com. If you need support around any of the issues that we've raised today, or access to any of the services like condoms, free pregnancy testing, free pregnancy counselling, or just want information on the services we provide in general, you can email info@Sexual Health Centre, or helpline is 021 427 6676. And please do follow us on our social medias. So we have Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. All of the kind of events or announcements will go out on these as well. So if we are holding any other webinars or different things, you can find all of the information on that as well.
And I suppose, again, if people do want to submit questions and feedback to the email address, we will certainly come back to them in episode 2. I suppose we're running quite over time now at 5 minutes. So do we have time for a question, Mara? Do you want to take one?
I'll take one, yeah, if there's one there, no problem.
Yeah. So I suppose one question that has come in is, what happens if a young person under 17 seeks support from the Sexual Health Centre?
So if somebody under 17 seeks support from us, technically we're aware that they've engaged in a sexual act underage, or I suppose main remit and our main concern is supporting that person with any issues that they have. So we will want to help them and want to deal with them. So we have access to free pregnancy testing for them if that is an issue that they need, and we can also provide free condoms so that they can protect themselves. We will of course be linking them up with support, so we'll be looking for a parent, a guardian, contact details so that we can make people aware and that they can be supported in and around this. But we will also be taking care of the client because that is our main focus.
Excellent. I suppose we'll come back to a few more questions maybe as they come in through the email in episode 2 as well. But I just want to thank everybody for attending this afternoon. I hope you really